Ladies and gentlemen, join with me in welcoming Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley, Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, political leader of the PNM, to the podium and to address us all.
All is long, no matter what, come on, gonna make it. Yes, I'm gonna make it. Remember the days of totes in water, anytime that you have to bid. But when people pass and they see you, oh my Lord, used to feel that shame. Wondering if this lasts forever, wondering when you will feel proud. If it's one thing Daddy didn't tell me, there is sunrise after each cloud. I say, even though the road is long, no matter what, come on, no, I'm gonna make it. Hey, oh Lord, I'm gonna make it. Even though the road is long, no matter what, come on, no, I'm gonna make it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chaguanas East. Thank you very much, my colleague from Aruka Maloney, Member of Parliament and Minister of Planning and Development of Trinidad and Tobago. With me at the head table, my colleague, Senator Clarence Rambrat, our Minister of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries, and the able Attorney General, Member of Parliament for San Fernando West, Mr. Faisal Rowley. And right here in Chaguanas, the young, the hard-working, the PNM's officer, Senator Avinash Singh. Deputy political leaders, Mrs. Joan Yule Williams, Senator Ruhan Sinanan, Mrs. Marlene MacDonald, other party officers, my cabinet colleagues, other members of parliament of both houses, members of council from Chaguanas, from Toko Sangregandi. I see we have Chairman Rondon here. I don't know how he does it, but he's here every time, wherever we are. I gather you're leaving the service. You're liking it too much. Members of the community here and visitors to Chaguanas East, and the many tens of thousands of you at home. I want to be very thankful to you, all of you, who have filled this hall to capacity. On your behalf, let me, on all our behalf, acknowledge that our Muslim brothers and sisters are currently engaged in the opening period of fasting, Ramadan, and we wish them all well, and we look forward to joining them at Eid at the end of the celebration with a national holiday. Ladies and gentlemen, I've heard a lot tonight, and if you have heard half of what I've heard, maybe you too might be as concerned as I am and as pleased as I am. Concerned that we have serious problems in this country, but pleased that we are tackling and fixing the problems in Trinidad and Tobago. You have elected me Prime Minister, meaning head of the cabinet, with the cabinet being the administrative body, to tackle the country's problems. Some people believe that that is magic. Some believe that it cannot be fixed. And some believe that just say and criticize anything that's going on now, and that is good enough. We in the PNM, especially in the government, we believe that criticism is okay, but it also requires a comparison, equivalence. What is the solution? Yes, criticize. But if you're criticizing what is going on now, especially if you have your own personal agenda, what is the alternative? Let me give you one little example. Recently, out of the blue, arose a national conversation that lasted for exactly 8 days about publishing the SEA results. And I said to myself, this country really is a happy place. Because I thought we had real problems. And for 8 days, the conversation in this country is whether or not we should publish SEA results. And of course, that morphed very quickly into a national crisis. That the biggest problem in the country was that we should abolish the SEA. And I listened to that because as leader of the country, unlike some people, they say, I read the papers every day, I listen to the radio when I can, I listen to the television when I can, because I want to know what's going on in the country. I want to know how people are being affected, what ideas they have, how reasonable they are, how unreasonable they are, what can I put to them? So I listen all the time. So I'm listening to the SEA discussion. And yes, we must abolish the SEA because it's doing this to the children and doing that to the children. Up to now, I have not heard from a single person replace it with what? Okay, a lot of arguments about how it should be abolished. And we must abolish it. But from authoritative sources, yes. But what do we replace it with? It must be replaced by something, starting with nothing. Because there was a time when we had no need for any SEA, because we had no school places. That was the easiest problem to solve. Have no school place for children to go nowhere, so you have no SEA. But today, we have school places for all our children. And if you abolish it, there must be an alternative. The alternative is you zone children. Go to school where you live, where the school is. Is that going to be acceptable in this country? Or you just have a lottery and you pick your school place, random lottery. Is that going to be acceptable in this country? What the SCA was is a selection process. It used to be called common entrance with all its problems. And we thought that we'll change the problems or get rid of them by changing the name. I have seen absolutely no change except the name between the selection process that was called common entrance and the process that is called SCA. And until I hear what the alternative solution is, I leave that problem there for now and for a little while. But you elected me to lead the country. And the country has a plethora, a whole host of problems. And it is the government's job to engage those problems and try to fix them. And the fixing is not always going to give you a result today, because if you start planting forests today, you don't get timber the next year, not even the next 10 years in some instances. So we're fixing problems in Trinidad and Tobago. And in the meantime, as we're renovating this house, we have to live in it. And we have to afford to pay the bills. Because I need not spend any more time reminding you, because I'm sure all of you came here and all of you at home, all of you know that we don't have the financial resources to do all the things that need to be done. You know that. So then the question is, what do we do with the resources we have, and how do we get some more resources? That's what the government is about. But in the meantime, even as we have demand for those additional resources that we are short of now, we have borrowed and spent money years before, and we have to pay it now. So the public debt is in front of us to be paid. I can tell you, with all our collapse in our revenue stream, two things have not happened in Trinidad and Tobago. One, we have not gone to the IMF to run our country. And we have not defaulted on any aspect of our public debt. And there are those who will say, well, that is nothing to talk about. Of course we can't default on the public debt. Or is that so? Don't find the money to pay it and see whether I can call that default. I told you about the situation when we one day go to cabinet one day and was told that we owe $200 million to be paid in 14 days, or we're going to default. We were there. We've been there. But we didn't default. We found a way to pay it, But more importantly, we found a way to keep the country on an even keel, sustaining and proving wrong all those who have said that it will collapse. All those who have said the economy has collapsed. We have managed in difficult circumstances to do a number of things. Let me take you through a little 15-point plan of what we have been able to do in the last 38 or there months. So, public debt have been paid. We have paid $5 billion to public servants during that period. I hear the leader of the PSA trying to encourage public servants to create disturbance in this country. I'm just saying to you, people of Trinidad and Tobago, all of you public servants and otherwise, in this term of this government, in this difficult period, this country has managed to pay to public officers $5 billion in back pay. But let me say something else to you. We could only have done that because we borrowed the money to do it. Some of our critics have said that we were irresponsible as a government to have done that, to borrow money to pay back pay when you have no money. But we said it was a contract between the government and the public servants. And for the stability of the country and the public service is an integral part of the country's well-being. We took that debt on board onto the public debt, $5 billion. So in any future conversation you're hearing about public servants, just remember, the public servants, in this period that we are managing, this period of difficulty, their $5 billion of back pay has been paid. It was paid in 2 tranches. You may recall Minister Inbert paid half, and then we paid the other half. Of course, in that situation, you would hear certain persons saying that we have been engaging in mass retrenchment in the public service. Not a single public servant, a gazetted public servant in Trinidad and Tobago has been retrenched as a result of our economics. Not a single one. Some contract officers have not had their contract renewed either because their positions were not required or because we couldn't afford them as a priority. But not a single gazetted public servant has been retrenched. I talk to my colleague in Barbados on a regular basis. She's one of my closest colleagues in this business of Prime Minister. And we talk all the time. In the short time that she has been in office dealing with Barbados, similar situation. You know how many thousands of public servants have been sent home? Yeah? 3,000 went out in one batch, 3,000 in one batch. These are gazetted public servants. And there's talk that there's more. I was in a meeting recently, and we as Prime Ministers agreed to pay a bill. Small bill, but it hadn't been paid because all of us are under pressure. But we had to pay this bill to a particular aspect of CARICOM. And the Prime Minister of Jamaica said, I couldn't agree because I can't agree to that because I'm talking to the IMF. We are under an IMF program. Jamaica is under an IMF program, so is Barbados. Trinidad and Tobago, we have taken a different course, that we will face the difficulty. And by difficulty, I'm talking about making the priorities our choice. And while we're doing that, of course, there is opportunity seized by others that, oh boy, we could talk about we're not getting this, and we're not getting that, and we're not doing this, and we're not doing that, as though when money was filling pockets in this country, they had all done these things, and they had all given these things. It falls to us to do more with less, and we have been doing that. We have maintained the total suite of social services in this country. We have made some more efficient, but we have not shut down a single social service program. Not a single one. Every single social program that was in place when we came into office, we have maintained. What we have done in a period of straitened circumstance is to cut out waste and corruption as far as we were able to. But we've maintained the programs. Today, there are tens of thousands of people who wait for the social service check, to put food on the table, to put the children to bed at night, and to live a decent and dignified life in this country. Not a single program has been shut down. As a matter of fact, in 2 of the major programs, in some aspects of the public of the old age pension, we have made increases possible. And in the disability program, we've given increases to those persons who are getting disability grants. We've increased that. We have also reduced the tax burden on the lowest layer in the tax program. Persons who were earning up to $60,000 a year were tax-free when we came in. We made that $72,000. So we moved the minimum from $5,000 a month to $6,000 a month. Tax-free. You will never hear that from the aspirants who want to get back into the treasury. You will never hear that from those who are accusing the government of doing nothing. We gave tax relief to tens of thousands of persons in these difficult circumstances. And of course, you know, housing, major issue for many families in this country. We have restarted, listen to me, housing projects that were abandoned. We restarted some of them and have completed some of them. Recently, I went to Moruga, and the HDC distributed keys to people going into a new housing development. It was the most beautiful thing that this government could have done. Houses to people in Moruga. In one place in Moruga, outside of the HDC program, we had an aided self-help program which has now won one of the prizes for one of the best programs in the IDB, where we got the community to come in and put in sweat equity and build themselves nice little two-bedroom houses to come out of the shacks and shanties that they were living in recently. Go down to Samuel Cooper and see where they live now as a result of 36 months of PNM effort. Right there in Valsain, there were abandoned HDC houses in this straitened period with no money. We had to find $114 million to put the contractor back to work, because when money was flowing into lawyers' pockets, the houses were left unattended and abandoned there. $114 million this cabinet approved, and we went back to Valsain, restarted the project, and we are almost completed there, and there are only a few left in there to be handed out. So whether it was a REMA, in Valsain, in St. James, in Moruga, the housing program continued to provide opportunities. And if you want to see happiness in this country, see the day when a family gets a key to an HDC house. See the day. Look at the faces. And of course, you know, how many of you who follow sports? I think is this weekend coming up? Our young people, boys and girls in cricket, the finals are taking place. Hillview College, Presentation College, Barrackpore, at the Brian Lara Sporting Academy, one of the finest sporting grounds in the Caribbean. Left to rot, restarted under this government, and is today we are very close to ICC recognition. The ICC has made a visit, looked at it, very happy with it, made some recommendations. There are a couple of things we need to do. When those things are done, I have every confidence that the next venue in the Caribbean that will have an ICC certification would be the Brian Lara Academy. Left to rot. 2 weeks ago, we opened the Diego Martin Sporting Complex. Left to rot in the foundation. It is today, as I speak to you as Member of Parliament for Diego Martin West, the finest sporting facility. The finest sporting facility. It is so fine that even the great Brian Lara came to Diego Martin and lost. Diego Martin beat Santa Cruz down there last weekend. Fine facility, abandoned for 5 years when money was flowing. We've completed that. We've completed tonight you would have seen, those of you who are at home, you would have seen the police, Crime Stoppers in Carnage having an outreach at the Carnage fishing facility being used as a community location, a community venue. And we have a number of unfinished projects, not the least of which are 22 schools. When you hear Mrs. Prasad Bisesa say that they built 100 schools when they were in office, I heard of that nonsense last week again. They built 100 schools. I want to ask the media, to ask Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, to give you, the media, a list of the 100 schools that they built when they were in government. I will tell you what they did though. Just before the election, they awarded a series of projects for school building, none of which had any funding in the national budget. Would you believe that? Hand out money left, right, and center to contractors to build some schools, not 100. But there was no provisioning of money in the national budget to fund those schools. When we came into government, we met a number. It's about 30 or 40 schools with contractors on them. And the money that we were able to scrape up during our tenure, we had to pay the contractor for the work they did before we came in. So we are only now paying them money to do work that will be applied to the schools now. So as I speak to you now, there are 22 schools that are about to be restarted, to be completed, because that is what the funding arrangement, because the contractor wouldn't finish the school if the money you could pay him only applies to what he did in 2015. You understand what I'm saying? That is what we face. And while that was going on, billionaires were being created. And of course, as I speak to you now, when we came into government, we met the highway to Point 14 stopped. Because the highway to Point 14 somehow ended up down as a highway to DB, an offshoot, right? The intention was to build a highway past the creek, down through the main road, down through Rizlak, into Point 14, and off that highway, you could build spurs into the other areas. They took the main project into their constituency, and it got mad in corruption there, and the project stopped and got stuck down in there. I can tell you now, and all the people of the Southwest Peninsula, the highway to Point 14 is now fully under construction from the creek to Point 14. The last piece of that work, about 3 weeks ago, we awarded the contract and turned the sod for a contractor, or 3 contractors, starting from the Point 14 end, coming to meet those who are coming down from the creek. The whole project is now awarded, bridges awarded, everything is there. So as long as we pay the bills going forward, every single piece of that road would be built, and you can then drive down to Point 14 on a highway. And of course, subsequent to that, we'll take the spurs off that highway into the areas of Faizabad, into Monday Zero and so on. But you know, in the first, we could only have done that because Minister Stuart Young led the charge for this government to go back to the court around the world to take back money that they had left in the hands of a contractor, $921 million. Had we not fought and won that battle, and a battle that was created because election week, the last government took out from the contract the clause that said if a contractor goes bankrupt, the government could fire the contractor. So the contractor went bankrupt and left with the fight with $900 million. We have to go to court and fight to win it. And they're still fighting in arbitration to try and get it overturned. But in the meantime, the court told us, spend the money. And you know, in the face of that, only yesterday, yes, this was Monday, only yesterday in the parliament, the MP from the UNC gets up in the parliament to ask me, when are we going to be building the highway to Monday Zero? Asking me that, you know, after they wasted billions of dollars on it. In the land acquisition alone, they spent almost $1 billion. and now asking me as though I am doing something wrong and my government is doing something wrong because they want to claim discrimination. Because we are now building the highway from the creek down through Rizlak into Point 14, they want to come with a stupid talk about discrimination, asking me when are we going to be building the highway down to Mount Desir? Because that is where they always end up, Always end up, race and religion. Right? Unfortunately for this country, our opposition is not a political opposition in politics. Jamaica has the JLP and the PNP. Barbados has two political parties. In Trinidad and Tobago, you have to go through religion and race to get to the politics of this country. Yeah? And you see something called shame? They have no shame whatsoever, Because you would have known what you would have done. You would have heard us telling the country on a daily basis what we are facing and why. And instead of taking responsibility and hanging your head in shame, you come and try to score political points. So we go on. We have now, you remember, when we had something called, we met the contractors at the Hyatt, at a contractors forum. And the contractors have this magic figure that government owed them $4.5 billion. Remember that story? Every time you talk to contractors in Trinidad, government owed them $4.5 billion. And I said, let's put this thing to bed. I will chair a committee. All contractors under your organization, come to us, show me what you're owed, what for, and so on. And they came. And after they stretched it like a rubber band, they could only show a debt of just over $600 million. It was just old talk. Because I was always saying, if the government owed contractors $4.5 billion, how much was the original sum? When we got to the point, you had to beg them to, when they came, 600 and just over $600 million. Well, I can tell you today, we've paid that down. Today we are told, only yesterday or Sunday, I think I was told, we now owe contractors for ongoing works. And for some works that have been done in the past, the figure is now $220 million. Which means that we have paid down on that particular debt, 2/3 of it, $400 million. But I tell you something else too. Even as that is so, only last week, I heard the same spokesperson saying to the media that government owe contractors $4.5 billion. The Valencia to Toko Highway, the Valencia to Sangrandi Highway, which got itself at the Privy Council. I had the pleasure to visit a few weeks ago, and I could tell you that road is going full speed ahead and is well underway. That project is well underway. Kumuto to Sangre Grande, to give Sangre Grande another road in, to take away that traffic and logjam that takes place in Sangre Grande on the western side there every day, and to open up access to Sangre Grande and the eastern counties. I can also tell you that the road improvement work, the highway improvement work from Valencia roundabout, which we are building now, on the way to Toko, that work is underway. There are 3 contractors on site employing hundreds of people, and the work is underway. But there's a story that goes with that. When we had not started the project, because it took some time to get work going, get the engineering going, get the funds in place and so on, we started to be accused of not keeping our promise. So important was that promise, because it was the last commitment we made to the people in 2015 in our last meeting in Sangre Grande. And they were starting to say, oh, the PNM doesn't keep its promise. You know, the minute the news came out that the contracts had started and 3 contracts were awarded, the whole talk is now, it's an election gimmick. A campaign commitment made in 2015 being executed in 2019 is a campaign gimmick. Well, the people in Cumana, Rampanalgas, Toko, Garniver, they are so happy for that gimmick. Today, I traveled 85 miles northeast of Tobago. by private helicopter. Because up to this date, I can tell you, I have never sat in a government helicopter as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. Today I went out to visit BHP in one of their Bristol helicopters to see for the second time where we are drilling and how progress is going on in our deep water acreage, 85 miles northeast of Tobago. And while I was out there, one Coast Guard vessel came out, and I know by now they're back home because they can't stay out there. One of the things that happened to this country is that we have had a crime problem for quite some time, getting worse all the time. And the root of that problem is a national security border protection issue. We sought to fix that as well as to protect our new acreage out there by buying and paying for vessels that could secure our border and protect our oil and gas resource. Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bisesa came into office as head of something called the PP. They were not content to say we don't agree that we should buy those vessels. They canceled the contract, bad talk the vessels, take back the $1 billion. And the question now is, how much of that they get locked up for this week? $1 billion for security, for border patrol, for not leaving platforms out there exposed in this world of all kinds of people who will do you harm. Take back the $1 billion. I want you, members of the media and members of the national population, to ask Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bisesa what happened to the $1 billion they took away from the British company and canceled the OPVs. OPVs that are today protecting the Brazilian offshore. The Brazilian Navy has those 2 vessels protecting the Brazilian offshore platforms. They're called the Trinidad-class vessels. I can tell you now, even under the present circumstances, using an improvement only by borrowing, because we don't have the cash in account, we have entered into feasible borrowing arrangements with the Australian government. And only last week, the first vessel, the hull, has been started, and 2 Coast Guard Cape-class vessels are under construction in Australia for the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard. Those vessels will have the ability to leave Stobles and to go out to sea for between 21 and 28 days. And of course, you can't have one, because when the one comes in, then you have no protection. You have to have at least 2. So when one comes in, one goes out. One comes in, one goes out. So you always have protection out there. So we've ordered 2. And sometime next year, I will invite you to receive them when they arrive in Trinidad and Tobago. That's what we're going to be doing. And that could only have happened because the Australian opposition did not take the bait offered to them by the UNC to oppose the Australian government who were assisting us with loans to buy that vessel and the 2 vessels for Tobago. We are currently building 2 ferries for the Tobago route, for the Tobago economy, for the Trinidad and Tobago people, paid for by OPIC, the Australia offshore lending facility. And we're only doing that because the Australian Attorney General refused to take the bait offered to him by the Trinidad and Tobago opposition, telling him that this assistance from Australia to Trinidad and Tobago is something that should be stopped because Wade Bark don't like it. Ladies and gentlemen, a people who does not know its history, does not appreciate its culture, is a people not deserving of independence. I want to invite all of you here and this entire nation to travel around Queen's Park West by Christmas. And it will be the finest street in the Caribbean because all our heritage buildings would have been restored, renovated, and back in track. Even in this difficult situation, we found $3 million to buy back our heritage that somebody had in England, the Casabon paintings. As far as the UNC concerned, that is something to complain about. We heard that somebody who had those paintings, which is our heritage, and they put it up for sale. And we rushed and bought it back. And rather than see good in that, Kamala Persad-Bissessar and her Philistine cabal see that as something to hold up against the Keith Rowley government. Well, if that is something for which I am to be drawn and quartered, I stand accused that I am guilty. So, Stallmeyer's Castle, complete, renovated, and stands proud in Queen's Park West. By the end of June, Whitehall would be complete, and the Cabinet Office at last will return to Whitehall. Work has started on one of those buildings which the engineers were telling us might have to be demolished because it had been so badly deteriorated, Millfleur. With Cuban expertise and local contractors, work has started on Millfleur. And we are expecting to complete that work by the end of the year. So at the end of this year, in a time, not a time of plenty, but a time when we have done what a people has to do to remain with its dignity and its history intact, you drive up that street from QRC, up the road, past the Archbishop House, past the Bishop House, past Millfleur, past Whitehall, past Stallmeyer Castle, and that would be the finest piece of architecture in the Caribbean preserved by the people who own it. We saved $400 million in the planned parliament renovation. When we came into office, we met commitments to go forward to repair the parliament at a cost of over $800 million at a time when we have 8 cents. But in a period of good management and doing more with less, I could tell you now that by Republic Day, the parliament will open in the Red House. Where the 13 floors that we are occupying down the road now will be free up for other use. And more importantly, we did so $400 million less than what we meant it can be done for. And let me tell you how we were able to do that. Because part of that $800 million involved the parliament staff being housed in some other building to have been built. What we did is something that was spoken about for the longest while and wasn't done. And I'm sure most of you in this room didn't notice. We moved the Ministry of Agriculture from the building it was in St. Clair to Chaguanas. Are you aware of that? The Ministry of Agriculture was moved out of Port of Spain into the center of the country. Farmers are now able to go to the ministry, and the ministry can now become a part of the farming environment in this country, out of St. Clair. What that did wasn't only for the agricultural side of it. It allowed CLICO to move out of the CLICO building next to the parliament. And in a few weeks' time, CLICO moves into what was agriculture. And the building that CLICO has moved out of, the Cabildo building, the office of the Attorney General, that portion of it that was in that building, moves into what was the Clico building. And the government's Cabildo building now becomes an extension of the parliament. If you go to town, you will see we built a bridge from the parliament across the street into Cabildo. And this country has so much of miserable people. You know that was a problem for some people. We have all the approvals from the Heritage Trust, from everybody who has to give an approval to link the parliament to an existing building to save hundreds of millions of dollars. So the parliament staff and the parliament support would be in what is now the Cabildo building where the AG used to be. And now the parliament can function, the renovated building will have our 2 chambers. You can have Senate and House meeting on the same day because there's the House chamber and the Senate chamber. What that will do, it will speed up legislation in the country. You don't have to wait for the chamber to be empty for next week for the Senate to come. So the whole efficiency of legislation management and committee and so on can make. And by giving the parliament staff the Cabildo building, the parliament staff can now function more efficiently and the public can have more committees and so on. So our parliament becomes a more efficient and effective machine in the governance of Trinidad and Tobago at a lower cost. So when they tell you nothing is happening, that is nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, you know the cost of medicine for the entire country for a year? We have a number of hospitals. Tobago, Port of Spain, Point Forte, all over the country. The medicine for all those hospitals, for all those people who will tap into those facilities, $600 million for the year. I want you to digest that. $600 million is what it costs taxpayers to put medicine in the hospital. And when you hear, if somebody go there and a medication isn't available, they behave as though the sky is falling in and somebody hate them and somebody wicked, but we will have spent $600 million to make sure that the hospitals are supplied. When you digest that, I want you to put it back. You would have read the newspapers that 2 public officials got into difficulty for something called $1.4 billion. Those lawyers, all of them who were feeding in that trough, they ate up in 5 years, 2 years of medicine for the hospitals. In fact, it's 1.6 million. 2.5 years. 2.5 years of money for medicine for the hospital. And if you understand that, that is what corruption does to a people. The money is spent. The documents might show it's properly spent. But at the end of the day, the owners of that money, the people, in this case, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, would have been deprived. I have a personal beef with this matter because I raised this matter every single year that I was an opposition leader. Tonight, I want to say to Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bisesa, the difficulty that your 2 cronies got involved in at the court, you will not be allowed to exonerate and distance yourself from them. It is my intention to bolt them to your chest. And if after all of that, the people of this country are in the majority who want you back as Prime Minister, they're free to have you. And let me tell you why I feel this way. That could have been avoided and should have been avoided. Because from day one, the parliament functioned. Cast your mind back. We had made adjustments to how the parliament functioned. I was the first opposition leader that did the budget examination over, I think, the 3-day period, line item examination. We sat there for days going through the items. And one of the items that stood out in the very first year was that particular item of monies being paid to lawyers by the Attorney General office. Mrs. Kamla Prasad-Bissessar cannot say she didn't know. That matter of that line item was raised. I'm not in the parliament, I could call her she. She knew. And she was in a position from a distance to know that something was radically wrong here. Let me tell you, as Jamaicans say, how it go. I'm a geologist, but I'm also the Prime Minister. I'm in the cabinet, and a note comes for some well drilling in Wassa. I look at the numbers, at the cost, and I look at what they say they're going to do. As a geologist, I brought my thought to bear. What is this costing us per foot of well? And I queried it. And I sent it back. I said to the minister, ask Wassa to justify this, because I have the impression from my glance as a geologist that this is too expensive. That's what you expect of me. Mrs. Kamla Prasad-Bissessar, who gave herself senior counsel, she must have known that those numbers passing through her budget every year to the AG office should be a problem for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Because the budget was moving from $20 million a year before the off inquiry. It moved. The very first move they made was to 60 million. And we queried it. And they said it was because of the off inquiry that they had outstanding bills to pay, and so. By the time we got to the mid-year, I queried it again. It was moved to $84 million. And by the time the accounts was changed at the end of the year, it was $100 and something million. And Mrs. Kamla Prasad-Bissessar was there when every query was made, from the very first one to $100 million. And I tell you worse than that. When it got to $100 million, they said it was all about fighting corruption. PNM corruption, because as far as they're concerned, it have UNC law and PNM law. It have PNM corruption and UNC corruption. But I made the statement that then it would be a hell of a thing if the money that you are spending to fight corruption become itself the catalyst for more corruption. So say, so done. Because at $100 million a year, if they had kept it on that level, it would have been $500 million. They trebled it. 1.6 billion. And Mrs. Kamla Prasad-Bissessar sat there and approved it every single year. And what was worse, when Ananam Logan crashed, she looked around for an Attorney General, grooming one in the Parliament. Man propose, God dispose. And now that they have gotten into trouble, the one thing that you're not hearing being spoken about in Trinidad and Tobago is the word evidence. So she comes out now, like Pontius Pilate, let the law take its course. After she used the cabinet, the parliament, to give everybody a tush. Everybody in that cabinet was a prime minister, you know. That is how our country was run. And you know why? Let me tell you why. And it's no laughing matter. They were all holding secrets for one another. Everybody was a prime minister in that government. Today, almost 4 years into this term, you've had a prime minister, And when the Prime Minister is out of the country, the most senior member of the cabinet conducts the government's office as Prime Minister. It's no plating where they give everybody a tush. Vanilla Allen, Rambachan, Mooney Lal, Errol McLeod, all of them, Chaguanas, all of them Prime Minister in this country. Yeah? And they say once accident, twice bad luck, 3 times habit. How did she behave when the live sport story broke? Live sport was supposed to be a $6 million program to make sport available to young men during the summer season to keep them out of trouble. $6 million. $400 million. And when the story broke, driven by a member of the cabinet at the time, who was the only person in the government who saw something wrong with it, a motion was brought to the parliament about Arnold Roberts. What did Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bissassa do? She came to the parliament supporting Arnold Roberts down the line, giving him notes to say in his speech. And that speech ended on Hansard with "Long live live sport." Not to mention those who were killed in the program and the criminality which is still going on. That live sport bred a kind of criminality in this country that is frightening. And all of them in that cabinet sat there and watched a $6 million program eat up $400 million. And today they're asking me, why are you doing this? Why are you not doing that? Why are you not? And I'm telling them, no, right here, bring back the money you all thief and misspend, and we'll do that. And the only piece of good news I have for you is that she has agreed. She intends to create 50,000 jobs. The only way she could do that is if the billions that they have mishandled during that 5-year period is brought back into this country, because it takes billions to create jobs. It takes billions. You would have heard tonight from the Attorney General the kinds of laws we have been passing. Some of them of our own volition, others because we are forced to do so if we are to remain in the international banking community. The FACTA law, the Global Forum laws, whether we want to or not, those are requirements that we have to meet if we are going to maintain our presence in the international banking community. They oppose every single thing. Every single thing. Criminals running riot. The country is under attack from white-collar criminals and from violent criminals. We go to the parliament with anti-gang legislation. They vote it down. They vote it down because they prefer to have no law to fight gangs, and will only vote according to them if some perfect law is passed. After they vote it down, it is because you, the people, spoke up loudly about this misconduct on their part, and she realized that she couldn't get away with it. She called in, reopen the parliament, and let's go back and pass it. No, reopen the parliament. You're supposed to stay away 6 months before you can bring it back. So bad was that vote of the UNC that they begged to reopen the parliament and then agreed to change the standing order to allow the bill to come back to be voted in. The same bill that they voted down before. And they did the same thing with other bills. They organized you, the people, to tell you that they explain your wealth. Explain your wealth legislation. The whole country knows what is going on. Everybody knows what this country is doing to itself. This self-immolation, this corruption, this way everybody wants to have the hand in the treasury. And the fortunate few are the ones that are living like kings and the rest of us living like paupers. That's what they had. They want to preserve that. And you must not make any change because they know what the perfect change is and they're supporting nothing but the perfect change. So, you come to Parliament to give the police the authority to go after the evidence, they vote it down. You say with all that's happening in this country, especially in the public sector, where the money really comes from because the government is the largest supplier of money in this country. And it all comes out of various public service areas or state enterprises. Every one of you in this room, every one of you in this country know of or hear of some story where somebody is mishandling public money in this country. And most of you know people who are living the way they shouldn't live because they're thieving government money. All of you know it. But a bill comes to the parliament to protect people who would say what they know so that the persons who are abusing the public purse could be held accountable. The UNC, true to form, find a way not to support it. We of the PNM, we support the bail bill when the UNC was in government. A bill that says if you're caught in a particular way with a firearm and for certain crimes, when you are caught, you then don't get bail for 120 days. They kept it all the time while they were in office. The minute they go into the opposition and the law ran out and required to be renewed, they find reason not to renew it. How do you feel to know that a person, second or third charge, or even the first charge, in this environment in this country where nobody is safe and firearms are all over the country, and you could go into the court with a firearm charge, get your bail, and walk right back out, get another firearm the same night, and continue your mayhem? How do you feel about that? But you have an opposition that knows that if such a person is detained for 120 days, that is bad for the people. What is bad for the people? The gunmen that run in riot across the country? Or the law that says if you choose to find yourself with an unlicensed firearm, you get detained and kept detained for 120 days? What do you prefer? You the people tell me, what do you prefer? Because we are going back to the parliament. It was laid in the parliament today. You know what is going on in this country. I'll tell you, there was a time when that level of violence and those kinds of crimes were associated with Laventil and maybe Enterprise and maybe one or two other areas in the country. They were geographically confined by those communities. Today in Trinidad and Tobago, not a household here could say, I am safe because gun crimes are not in my neighborhood. And you know, even the leaders in this country are shameless, you know. Last week, the police is engaged in a very sensitive matter involving life and limb in a particular way. And they followed their intelligence, or lack thereof, you want to call it that. They followed their information and had a reason to enter some, I think about 7 homes in the Gulf View area. Well, the UNC couldn't be more glad because they linked that to their calamity in the courthouse. I can tell you now, what happened at Gulf View had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the UNC problem in the courthouse. This is a completely separate matter involving life and limb and serious criminality. Unfortunately, for the persons whose premises were entered, nobody wants to be in that situation. But I ask you, if you're walking past the road and you hear a woman shouting, oh God, help, and a police officer is passing, you say to him, go and get a warrant and go and deal that man in there who killed that woman. Right? You pass and you hear a child screaming. As a matter of fact, the law demands that you intervene. There are circumstances, and until you know the specific circumstance, don't jump on your high horse and start to prance. The commissioner of police said, the senior police officer said, we are engaged in certain operations, and at the appropriate time we will tell you what it is about. What's wrong with us? What's wrong with our people? It's only last week a police officer had to enter our premises and stop a man from chopping up a woman. He shot the man. The man died. The woman had, I think it was 6 or 7 chops. And apparently this man was prepared to chop her like a dead pig. Under our law, under certain circumstances, a warrant may not be required if the exigencies of the circumstances require that you intervene. So if you want the law to say only when you have a warrant could a police officer enter private premises, if you want that, say so. Because the colonial master left you with common sense that the police must get a warrant as long as a warrant can be had. If he violates your rights, then you have the courts to go to. But if the circumstances require immediate intervention or hot pursuit of a criminal, especially if life and limb is involved, the police can exercise some aspect of forced entry. But the minute that happened, the opposition and certain elements of religion jump into race and ethnicity and religion because they are about dividing Trinidad and Tobago, dividing it for their benefit. One pundit had to say, if it was West Moorings, how come no police ever go into West Moorings? That does not help our people. It does not put our children on a strong footing. What it tells the children, especially the children of East Indian heritage, that somehow in this country they are being discriminated against under their second class. That pundit never heard of the drug raid in West Moorings where people were arrested and surprised all of us that they had so much drugs in West Moorings. That in Glencoe, that pundit didn't hear. It was a West Moorings house that the police broke into and took out 19 young ladies who are very in a high-priced neighborhood. I can tell you as leader of this country that I will not, and the country does not tolerate the police only operating in one part or other part of the country. The police must operate across the country. And no person is above the law. And no person should and would be allowed to use your race and religion to stand above the law, because all of us have among us our own ragamuffins. So don't come and tell me that. You see, until we stop this stupidness in Trinidad and Tobago, our society will not improve. And if you appoint yourself a leader, you must not be allowed to go to that situation. What's happening now under this government is that we have taken responsibility for building the new society. Because a new society has to be built in Trinidad and Tobago if we are to benefit from our potential. And the new society will have it as accepted that when you elect public officials, you didn't elect them to go and line their pocket and turn millionaires. Some of them all about living like Mrs. Howard Cat. The minute they get government office, they turn millionaire and billionaire and showing off on you. And then some of them in the parliament blocking legislation to protect themselves from their own actions. But the new society must have you saying, when you see a police officer in or out of uniform, you must know that you can believe that he or she is an honest person discharging his responsibility the way the law says. You must know that when you hire a customs officer, he or she is not there to enrich him or herself using the office in a corrupt way. You must know that if you have people in the court who are officers of the court, that they are not there to undermine the handling of justice for their own benefit. Until we are prepared to adjust these issues. And they come in a variety of ways, you know. It's not all about court and law, you know. It's like Petrotrin. If you are not prepared to shut down the refinery losing $2 billion, then how are you going to fix it? We've done that. Not because we wanted to hurt people, but because we have to build a new arrangement to make it work for us in a better way. Let me give you one last example, because they like to tell you that they will do this, and they will do that, and they will do the other. In 2005, the government then had the concept of building an oncology center in Mount Hope, a special hospital to deal with cancer. 2007 construction started. The architect went bankrupt. And somewhere in that arrangement, the architect owned the foundation drawings. And in the legal aspect of it, the architect was holding on to the legal side of it, and the project got stalled. 2007 it started. The government changed in 2010, and that problem, that legal problem was there. That project was supposed to cost $900 million. This country spent $300 million and got an abandoned foundation. Only last week, we were able to settle out of court because the contractor had the country in his grasp. We settled out of court to bring an end to that. I want to ask you something. With Senior Counsel Attorney General and Senior Counsel Prime Minister, between 2010 and 2015, what happened? What happened? And of course, that was a $900 million project. When they came to conclude it under this government, they wanted some hundreds of millions of dollars to go forward. We don't have it. We took a different route. We are building a facility, it's almost complete in St. James, to have the service provided at the St. James Hospital with the equipment there. That's what we can afford now. But that was the environment in which people were taking public money by the barrel full. And yesterday, I had to see the opposition leader laugh at the government. And let me tell you how she did it. We have been saying to you that, for example, the QREP roundabout was going to be built. The contract was awarded for some $500 million. When we came in, we stopped it, and we started over. And we went out to tender, and the QREP overpass is now being built for just over $200 million, I think $221 million. And the same kind of arrangement we found, as I mentioned, with the Red House, and as I mentioned, with the same highway, Kumuto to Manzanilla, that kind of thing. You know what she said yesterday, laughing at us? She heard the government saying that we save so much money. How come you could save money that you will spend? Totally shameless and without responsibility. That QREP contract didn't go forward only because the election changed the government. The contract was awarded. It was fought over. Then they divided up into three pieces to give one contractor the northern side, one the piece over the highway, and one the southern side. We said, no, we're not doing that. And by stopping it and tendering the whole process without corruption, it is now costing us $221 million. And Mrs. Kamala Prasad-Bissessar laughs in the parliament at that. She laughs in the parliament at the fact that had we not changed the government, you would have been paying OAS $921 million and not get a foot more road going to Point 14 on the highway. She laughed at that yesterday. And that is what it is. I said to you early, that one of the most important responsibilities of a leader, especially leading government, is the people that you appoint. And if you believe that, look at who she appointed. Look at who she defended. From the very first day I became opposition leader, I could have saved her some trouble. I took issue with the appointment of Chaguanas to the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago because I said his personal business was going to get mixed up in the state business and would embarrass this country. So say, so done. And it was only when external investigators, water more than flour, that Chaguanas got out of the cabinet as acting prime minister. Anil Roberts from the live sport, you may recall what Mrs. Prasad Bissessa did. There was a report about live sport. She, as senior counsel, knew that if that report was made public, it couldn't be acted upon. And Anil could go to court and sue and say he was not given the opportunity to be heard by talking to the report before it was made public. Public servants warned that the report should not be made public. She pretended to be dealing with live sport and made it public. Anil goes off to court and of course he wins the case. The day when Anil Roberts wins the case, what does she do? Come down in Diego Martin and announce that Anil is going back in the Senate. You all forgot that? You forgot that? She and Wade Mark. They said Wade Mark, who have a million questions to ask now. Where I live at the Prime Minister's residence, across the road is the Carlton Savannah. Through the FCB, taxpayers have lost $400 million there. Because at FCB, they loaned money to those who were looking to form third force, right? And looking for a political entity who end up in the parliament, in the Senate, go in there with taxpayers' money, help themselves to it, spend it, and at the end of the day, walk away from the debt with no liability, $400 million. And how did she reward them? She take the architect of that and make him Minister of Finance in the government of Kamala Prasad Bissessa. So when it's not Anil Roberts, when it's not Chaguanas, it's Larry Hawaii, and of course, Anna Ramlogan and Ramdeen. That is what she offers you as a leader in this country. And if this country wants to turn a blind eye to that, if you want to turn a blind eye to that, what you get, you take. Because look at what has happened. Look at what has happened. A former Attorney General and an aspirant Attorney General off to the courthouse to answer questions for public money. And the person who was instrumental in selecting and promoting them pretends that she has no responsibility for that. Let the law take its course. No shame, no apology, calling for elections because she believes that the population will follow her foolishness and her cabal and her corrupt practice. Unless Trinidad and Tobago steer away from this life of corruption, we will not improve. And you have elected me for one term, and I will serve you that term. And at the end of the term, you will decide if you want us to continue to do what we are doing in improving and building this country, or if you want the cabal back. You will decide that. And when I say we're building a new society, I'm saying we are rejecting all of that. We are rejecting all of that because we are better than that. We are not hiding behind race and religion. We are standing behind the red, white, and black of Trinidad and Tobago. We are all in this together. We are all in this together. And if we stand together, we will all come out of this. And as we say, great is the PNM, great is the PNM, great is the PNM, and we shall all prevail.